Historically, the Final Fantasy franchise has never shied away from making hard-hitting topics the forefront exploration of their narratives. The series has tackled themes ranging anywhere from eco-terrorism to the corruption of religious institutions to the evils of war, and the latest entry in the series is no different. In my opinion, the core thematic focus of Final Fantasy XVI delves into the conversation of how slavery and systemic racism is upheld by society and the trials and tribulations of working to achieve true social change, and it pulls no punches while doing so. I wanted this game as blind as possible for various reasons, and I was shocked that a franchise as big as Final Fantasy was willing to take a risk at overtly tackling such a taboo topic with their second mature game in the series. As a black person whose biggest gateway into writing was Final Fantasy, I felt that this topic was something that I was absolutely driven to talk about. I hope that this game serves as a gateway into learning more about the impact of slavery in modern society for people the same way that it was for me in writing. And what better way to do it than with magic, kaiju battles, and beam clashes. I'll be analyzing how the game effectively tackles its themes from a narrative perspective as spoiler-free as possible, and I'll also be linking further readings and any sources I use throughout the video. Some of the things I cover in this video might be very surface level and obvious to you, but remember that many people are intentionally not taught the reality of racism and slavery. And again, this is a spoiler-free video, but there will be a marked section for spoilers towards the end. So without further ado, let's get into it. The story of Final Fantasy XVI takes place in the land of Valisthea. In this land, civilizations and factions have grown and settled around mother crystals, giant sources of crystal which channel the energy called Aether, the life force of the planet. This energy can be channeled into magic which completely shaped the modern society of Valisthea, allowing for the impossible to be manifested into reality on multiple scales. Using this magic, however, comes at a cost for its users. Each of the country's powers are kept in balance by the power or control of the dominant, people who are able to host icons, which are godlike beings worshipped by each faction. Icons are inhuman magical beings that are the symbol of power that each of these countries are built upon. While many people are unable to channel magic, there are groups who are able to do so from birth called bearers. Once bearers are found to hold the ability to use magic, they are persecuted, cold, and branded with a mark on their face to brand them as slaves. Because bearers hold the ability to improve modern society, they're enslaved, controlled, ostracized, and treated as tools. Now the question here is, how does society reach the point of dehumanizing and enslaving people who have the ability to immensely improve the world they live in? The way that society justifies and upholds slavery is through dehumanization and deflection. People who are branded are disgustingly disrespected, being seen as less than animals and more as tools that cannot be maintained or repaired due to the petrification from the overuse of magic. This is how slavery is upheld throughout the game and in real life as well. It's important to recognize dehumanization and how it functions in order to eliminate it from society, because it's something that we've all upheld. Dehumanization is one of the points of no return when it comes to controlling groups of people or narratives. This is not limited to just race, it can be based on factors such as gender identity or sexuality. In the process of dehumanization, first people begin to identify groups as others who are flawed or different from them and cast them into an outgroup, and this can stem from the isms such as racism, sexism, or classism. This extreme prejudice can turn into dehumanization, which in turn results in the second step, a call to action against the outgroup. This is how many political movements and rallies against groups begin. And the final step is action against the outgroup itself, and this is when violence and hate crimes start. Dehumanization is essential when it comes to inciting negative social movements such as war, as it allows people to act without empathy and out of perceived necessity. If you're North American, you most likely hold or have held a dehumanizing view of another country in one way or another. Think about the war propaganda we see when it comes to Russia or North Korea. That's dehumanization at work. Another definition of dehumanization is when one person or group fails to acknowledge, consider, or account for another person or group's mind. This is how you get that cogs in the machine mentality, and this is how corporations like Amazon end up functioning. Like, whenever you get a package, you kind of dehumanize the people that work in that process. You don't really think about, oh, there's someone in the warehouse that takes it to this delivery driver, and then so on and so forth. You kind of just say, oh, my package is here within a day. And that's something that people are actively fighting against in our modern society. So whether you like it or not, we all kind of participate in this dehumanization. In his book Less Than Human, Why We Demean, Enslave, and Exterminate Others, David Livingstone Smith delves into how dehumanization festers. The practice of explicitly describing others as less than human is nowadays often frowned upon and is widely condemned. So propagandists who cultivate dehumanizing attitudes most often do this indirectly. Rather than overtly referring to a group of people as animals or monsters, they describe them in ways that invoke this image in their minds of their listeners. There are certain themes that reappear over and over in this dehumanizing discourse. The common one is criminality. The dehumanized group is made to appear inherently threatening, and their criminality is represented as crudely animalistic. Another common theme is parasitism. The dehumanized group conspires to exploit the majority, sucking the blood out of the decent, hardworking people and claiming privileges that they haven't earned. They are thought often as invaders, outsiders who are taking us over. They are reproducing at an alarming rate and they will soon outnumber us until we do something about it. We see these examples all throughout the game and it's done overtly, which is even worse. We see this dehumanizing view of barriers in tandem with indoctrination through one of the most impactful side quests in the game. In this side quest, the player has to help a little girl find her Chloe. She's really upset that she's lost her and that she may never be able to stroke her white hair again, in her words. Our protagonist Clive agrees to find what he believes to be her pet or toy and sets off, and he eventually finds a dog barking at a petrified body only for the little girl to appear upset that her toy won't work anymore and that her dad will have to buy her a new one in the meantime. One thing that I really like about this quest, aside from the great use of misdirection, is that Clive in the game doesn't paint the little girl as evil for this mindset and educates her on why it's wrong. Speaking of indoctrination, our protagonist Clive Rossfield is the eldest child of the Grand Duchy of Rosaria, the location where we're shown the first example of how barriers function in society, and at this point the player knows nothing of the world. In an early scene, Clive runs into a bear who's dropped an apple in front of him and the guard following his work. The bear starts to freak out at the fact that he messed up and starts to apologize profusely. Clive looks at him with indifference and status while the guard is furious at his mistake. I like this as the player's perspective and introduction to the world building because it paints Clive, our window into this world, as someone with a Eurocentric perspective of slavery, which allows our story to start with a neutral perspective on it. Clive is someone who was born into the system and doesn't truly question the morality of it until he starts to get older. Clive is 15 at this point of the story, has not only been around slavery but has immensely benefited from it as a member of the Grand Duchy. It directly shows the player how indoctrination is the method that amoral systems such as slavery are upheld through society, which is through intentional refusal to educate. Initially, the story doesn't paint this as right or wrong to further place the player into Clive's neutral and uneducated worldview. Rosaria is one of the few nations that treat their bearers as more than just tools, but at the end of the day, they're still enslaving people and using them as tools. But regardless of whether or not the factions ethically support enslaving bearers, they all do it in one way or another, as it would put them at risk of being conquested by another faction. The only way for the enslavement of bearers to end in Valisthea is for everyone to agree to stop benefiting from it. The game speaks on this conundrum by commenting on how to achieve true social change. Change doesn't come quickly and it isn't easy for anyone involved. We can only make true change if everyone is on board and is willing to go through hardship equally. This is seen in different groups believing that the path to true social change will result in being forced into a worse situation. There are some enslaved bearers throughout the game that believe that being freed would mean living a more difficult and painful life compared to being enslaved, so they chose to remain slaves. I don't agree with this portrayal in the slightest because it's historical revisionism and supports the harmful misconception that being enslaved is a choice. There are so many reasons that enslaved people weren't given any option besides death, which many slaves chose over being enslaved. There were so many factors at play such as the Fugitive Slave Act, malnourishment, and the large majority of the country being built to profit off your enslavement that prevented slaves from having a choice in enslavement. So if you've ever asked questions like, why didn't the slaves just run away, or why did the slaves just fight back and overthrow the people enslaving them, those are the answers to why that was. On the opposite end of the spectrum, the nobles throughout the game believe that freeing enslaved people would put them at an economic or social disadvantage. Many nobles acknowledge that they would be at a deficit without the bearers, and this is why they uphold enslavement. For true change, everyone needs to be willing to compromise, oppressors and oppressed alike. This next part of the video is going to cover spoilers, so if you don't want to see that, go to the end of the video. But this is definitely what I wanted to talk about the most out of this entire video, so I highly recommend coming back here after you finish the game. In his book Less Than Human, Why We Demean, Enslave, and Exterminate Others, David Livingstone Smith again explores why humans justify and enact slavery throughout history, and it stems from the human habit of categorization, hierarchy, and religion. Historically, humans have seen their existence under the lens of a hierarchy with God. This concept is called the Great Chain of Being, or the Scala Naturae, a hierarchy of existence that categorizes all matter of life. Below God are angels, and below that are humans, which position us as near perfect beings. This human tendency and desire to create hierarchy within our society tends to stir us to place certain groups of our own beneath us, which is where creating the other and casting them to an out group comes in. This is also where Ultima comes in. Ultima sees itself as a higher being than its creation of Valisthea and essentially wants to commit genocide to cleanse it. Ultima's ultimate goal is to cast rays and resurrect themselves. To do so, they're using humankind as tools the same way society uses bearers as tools to do so, further playing into this great chain of being concept that I was talking about. And of course, we have to fight God at the end, which in my opinion is the battle of ideals surrounding free will. The theme of social change comes back around the halfway point and ending of the game. Through meeting Sid, we're able to find a group that's making efforts to truly create social change within their society. Sid is another great leader because he never puts himself first or does anything in his best interest all throughout the game. Many reasons why society is unable to enact change is because most people act in their own best interest whether or not they like to admit it. For true social change, we need to act in the best interest of our future and for those who will carry on our will, even if it means we don't reap any of the benefits within our own lifetime. When Sid dies, he has no regrets because he knows that within his heart that Clive and everyone will carry on his legacy and will. He understood from the start that he would never reap any of the benefits of what he was fighting for, but properly educated his group on what to do and how to carry out his will without him, and that's what's needed for true social change. Even without Sid present, we are able to see the impact that he's made on the land and the people of Valisthea. No matter where Clive went, there was always someone who had something positive to say about him and his efforts. When Clive takes up Sid's name as a title, he preserves and carries on Sid's legacy as if he never died. The exact same thing happens when Clive resurrects Joshua and dies at the end of the game as well, leaving his legacy behind for another to take on the role of Sid in the future, bringing the theme of the cost of achieving true social change back around full circle. This is why I think the ending of the game is so ambiguous and tragic. When you're a vanguard of anything, let alone social change, you have no idea if the work you put in your own lifetime even amounted to anything, and you can only trust in those that succeed you to carry on your will. Finally, when Sid dies, he tells Clive that he learned something from him. While he was trying to free everyone, he realized that he wasn't giving them a choice and how important free will is in their goal. As Clive continues Sid's legacy, he strives to give everyone he's fighting for a choice in their freedom rather than determining their fate for them. The topic of the erasure of history is tackled in a side quest called An Inconvenient Truth through an excerpt of a book called From a Distance. The book chronicles the true history of the enslavement of bears and was universally banned by a group called the Executors, which is essentially this world's version of the CIA. Rather than reading the whole thing to you and stumbling over my words for 20 minutes, I'm going to put it on screen and summarize what happened. Essentially, bears were initially seen as gifts from the gods. They were given high office and rewards and had the status of chosen ones, and they were eventually going to make their own region. While everyone respected bears, they didn't want them leading their own church or anything like that, so they decided not to let them do that and banned every semblance of them being able to hold power. This eventually turned into bloodshed and created a rift between those who could use magic and those who couldn't. The bears were overthrown in this war, and the Continental Accord was created to create slavery that persecuted anyone that was a bear. The phrase bears are other than human became well known, and the rest is history. Bears being perceived as gifts from the gods goes back to the concept of the Great Chain of Being. If bears knew that they were heralded as gifts from the gods, they would most likely attempt to reclaim the title, which is why this history has been erased. This goes back to the point I made earlier in one of the first steps of enslavement, which is from the mental. If you ingrain the message that someone is X, they'll keep believing that they're X. The narrative of trying to prevent a group of people from gaining power is very much reflective of how many minority groups are treated throughout history. There's a reason that people aren't taught about events and concepts such as Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma in school. It's so that people don't get the idea to try it again and so that people aren't held accountable for it. Knowledge is power, and the control of knowledge is immensely powerful in the wrong hands. Once Clive finds the book, he's confronted by one of the executors. They state, if enough people believe that a set of events occurred for a reason, that belief becomes truth. Clive asks if they're trying to control the truth, and the executor refutes, claiming that they're trying to protect people from themselves by keeping them ignorant of the truth. I personally thought that this was an interesting approach to the topic that I haven't really ever thought about. Is it better to provide the truth to those who are oppressed when they can't do anything about it, or hide it from them and keep them ignorant? And with that, thanks for watching. I know this was a very loaded and heavy topic to cover, so I'll be trying to respond and read all the comments I can. If you have any questions, agreements, disagreements, want to talk about something, want more sources, anything like that, just let me know. I got them to the best of my ability. And I encourage everyone to engage in conversation in the comments as well. I know there's a lot of different types of people that might be watching this video, so just try to share information. And I'm really happy that I was able to combine my love of sociology and Final Fantasy into the video, and I hope I can keep this thing going because there aren't very many opportunities to talk about stuff like this. So if you like the video, check out my other stuff, like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell, because like 85% of y'all don't have that bell rung, and I'll catch you in the next video.